I stood in a courtroom in Erie, Pennsylvania, and listened to the only man I ever called my brother raise his right hand, swear to tell the truth, and then use it to bury me. 11 words is all it took. Walter ran that inspection. I wasn't even in the shop that day. I didn't shout. I didn't stand. I just watched Dale Pruitt look everywhere in that room except at me, the same way he used to look away at 15 years old when he owed me money he had no plan of ever paying back. But let me take you back to where this started, 3 years earlier, in a garage that used to smell like coffee and motor oil, before it started smelling like loyalty. My name is Walter Combs. I'm 64 years old, and for 30 years I fixed cars on the east side of Erie, the kind of work where a handshake was worth more than any paper a man could sign. My wife Carol always said I trusted people too easily. I used to tell her that trust was the one tool in my box I never had to buy twice. Dale Pruitt and I met in 6th grade. By the time we turned 30, we'd built Combs and Pruitt Auto Repair out of one rented bay into the busiest garage in the county. He was the talker. I was the one who stayed late making sure every bolt was tight. For 40 years I believed that made us a good team. About 3 years ago, I started noticing small things. Dale coming in late, Dale disappearing on supplier runs that never showed up on any invoice. I told myself a man is allowed a rough patch after 40 years of friendship. It never once occurred to me to ask what that rough patch might be costing us. The first domino fell on a Tuesday in October. Robert Delaney, the high school football coach, brought in his son Tommy's car for a routine brake job before Tommy drove back to Penn State. Dale told me he'd handle it himself, said he wanted to keep his hands busy. I was grateful. I had 12 other cars waiting. 2 weeks later, that same car lost its brakes on Route 19 on a hill every local knows to respect in the rain. Tommy Delaney walked away with a broken collarbone and a concussion. It could have been so much worse, and everyone in Erie who heard the story understood exactly how much worse. Robert Delaney was not a stranger. Half the town owed him something. The lawsuit named the business, which meant it named me, because on paper I was the majority owner. Our house was collateral on the loan we'd taken out years earlier to expand the shop. Our daughter Emily had already put a deposit down on a venue for June. If we lost, that money would go toward a settlement instead of a wedding, and we would lose the roof over our heads along with it. The local paper ran 3 inches about it under the headline, "Erie Mechanic Sued Over Faulty Brake Job." 3 inches was enough. By Sunday, half the congregation at St. Boniface couldn't meet my eyes during the sign of peace, and the other half looked at me like I was already guilty. Carol stopped going to her book club for a month. That is a particular kind of quiet nobody warns you about, when your name becomes a cautionary tale in the mouths of people who used to wave at you across the produce aisle. 4 days before the trial, I found Dale alone in the shop after closing, staring at an invoice he wasn't really reading. I asked him straight out if he'd tell the court the truth about who did that brake job. He wouldn't lift his eyes off the paper. "Course I will, Walt," he said. "We're brothers." I believed him because believing him had never once cost me anything before that night. Trust, I've learned, works a lot like brakes. You press down on it every day without a second thought, certain it will hold, certain it always has. You don't find out it's failed until you're already past the point where stopping was still possible. Carol asked me twice that winter whether I was certain Dale would tell the truth. Both times I told her not to worry, that Dale and I went back further than she and I ever had. I spent those months rehearsing his honesty in my head like a man practicing a speech nobody had asked him to give. I didn't realize until much later that I was defending Dale more than I was defending myself. On the day of the trial, Dale's lawyer entered a document I had never seen. 6 weeks before Tommy Delaney ever pulled into our bay, Dale had quietly signed his half of the business over to his son Michael. Not after the accident. Before it. He'd been skipping our equipment maintenance for over a year, pocketing the difference to cover a gambling debt in Pittsburgh, and he had made sure he'd own nothing the moment anything went wrong. That was when I understood. Dale hadn't panicked and lied to save himself in the moment. He'd built the exit ramp months in advance and driven me straight toward a wall he already knew was coming. I lost that case. We sold the house. Carol and I moved into a rental 2 streets over from the garage I'd built with my own hands and no longer owned. I won't pretend that didn't hurt, but I didn't go looking for Dale Pruitt to settle a score. I bought a used utility van, put my name on the side of it, and started fixing cars in people's driveways, one honest job at a time. Word travels slow, then all at once in a town like Erie. Dale's own son Michael found the old maintenance logs while sorting the shop's records for taxes. He drove out to our rental that same week, sat at our kitchen table, and told Carol and me everything: the gambling, the skipped orders, the transfer his father had talked him into signing without ever saying why. He looked sick telling it. I believed every word. I never needed Michael to stand up in any courtroom. Some truths don't need a judge, only enough people willing to hear them. Within a year, the shop still carrying Dale's name had half the customers it used to, because in a small town, a mechanic's word is the only inventory that actually matters. My little van, on the other hand, stayed booked 2 weeks out. I lost a business, a house, and 40 years of friendship in that courtroom. But Dale Pruitt lost the one thing this town never lends back twice: its trust. Have you ever had someone you trusted for decades disappear the moment the truth finally cost them something?